Hey everybody, it's Jenny from GrowthMode Marketing. You're listening to Demand Gen Fix, the podcast where our team of growth moders and our guests discuss the ins and outs of demand generation and why we believe it's the key to long-term sustainable growth, especially in the HR tech industry.
Hello everyone, Deanna and Greg from GrowthMode Marketing, back for another episode of the Demand Gen Fix. And this time we are talking about dialing in your marketing again and the 12 levers that impact results. This time we're focusing on tactics and measurement, and this is part 5 of the 6-part series. In the ever-evolving landscape of marketing, it's crucial to fine-tune every element to drive optimal performance. If you've listened in on previous episodes, we've delved into the first 8 essential marketing levers out of the 12 that we believe need to be dialed in to optimize your marketing performance. So on this episode, as I said, we're shifting our focus to the next 2 critical components, and that's tactics and measurement. These elements are not just about execution, they are about precision and impact. And by implementing strategic tactics and rigorous measurement practices, we can refine our approach, ensuring that every effort is aligned with our goals for sustained growth and success.
Yeah, so in episode 57, we talked about audience and positioning. And then in episode 58, we covered strategy and budget. And then in 61, we talked about scale and your contact database. And then in episode 62, we talked about brand awareness and content. So the remaining 4 levers we have are marketing tactics, measurement, marketing and sales alignment, and sales process. So today, as Deanna said, we're going to dig into tactics and measurement.
Yeah, so let's start with tactics. There's a lot of potential issues or indicators that, if they pop up, are a sign that you need to dial in your tactics portion of your marketing, right? And when we talk about tactics, we're talking about how do you get all your great content out in front of people? How do you create that brand awareness? It's basically the execution of your marketing programs, right? And one of the issues that we see companies have is becoming more and more common, I think, is the marketing tactics that previously worked aren't producing the same results anymore. So I'll give you an example. Email marketing, people's inboxes are getting much more cluttered, and we are seeing it, and we've heard it from a lot of other marketers out there. Like our email campaigns, the very ones that worked really well in the past, just aren't driving results at the same level as they did in the past. That's a problem, right? Just because marketing tactics worked previously doesn't mean they're going to continue to work for you as buyer behavior is evolving and as new technologies are coming out. It impacts the marketing programs. And so I think you have to look at it as constantly evolving what you're doing. In the example of emails, I think AI is part of the issue. There's a proliferation of emails coming into people's inboxes, more volume than ever before, right? And what happens when there's too many emails coming in people's inboxes is they start to not read their emails at all, and you get lost in the crowd, right?
And it's tough. It's tough because we've talked about numerous times, right? There's such a long buying cycle now, and people need so many more touch points. So you're trying to get those touch points and you keep sending out more and more and more stuff. But maybe that's not the right way to do it.
The right approach.
But you still need to get out there with all of those touch points. So that's where you're stuck in the middle. Tough one to figure out.
Yeah, for sure, which kind of goes into the next potential issue, which is we can't seem to reach our audience. It's the elusive buyer, right? Those elusive prospects who you know they're out there, you can't seem to find them or reach them, and it feels like you're doing a lot of marketing, but not getting the traction. That's another flag that it's time to take a step back and evaluate what you're doing from a marketing tactics standpoint. And I think part of that is understanding who is the audience, what are they doing, where are they going, and actually getting out there in the market and having conversations with them, right? To ask them outright, hey, do you read the emails that come in your inbox? If the answer is no, okay, good to know. I would never advise you completely strip emails out of your marketing strategy. It's one touch point though, and you have to have the perspective like, okay, Some people may read emails, some people may not. Open rates are going down, click-through rates are going down with emails. What other things can we layer in there to help us reach their audience? And I think another potential issue is these all kind of tie together weird, right? But you need more touch points with the audience. So that doesn't mean send more emails, as you were making the point, Greg, by any means. And we're picking on email because that's an easy one that a lot of people have said, oh gosh, this isn't getting the results that it used to. Across the board, I think marketing is getting harder because people are bombarded with so many messages every day. And so you need to look at, like, are we getting enough touch points with an audience? Because I think it was Gartner reported a year and a half ago in one of their reports that it now takes an average of 66 touches to create that brand awareness for an organization where they remember who you are. That's a lot. Back in the day, I don't know what numbers you've heard before, Greg. I feel like it used to be like 9 touches or something that was much more reasonable and manageable than it is today.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's not just doing more of the same thing, right? Because obviously, if you know that it's not producing the same results, then just doing more of that isn't really going to produce the results either, right? It's just creating more of that. So then you need to start looking at an omni-channel approach to marketing. Like, where is your ideal customer sitting? What are they reading? What events are they going to? And start really maybe adding some other things or extending in other areas and trying to get those touches there and build the brand up there.
Right. And in an omni-channel approach, what that means is we've got multiple channels running from a marketing standpoint so that there's those multiple touch points. So you're doing emails and direct mailing campaigns, you're doing webinars, you're doing events and trade shows, digital advertising, print advertising, social media, public relations. Like, the list can go on. And we're not saying do every single thing that you possibly can do unless you have the budget to do it. But being smart about picking which things you're doing. And again, I think it goes back to talking to your ideal customer profile and finding out, like, where do they go to learn about new solutions? Where do they go to educate themselves? What resources do they regularly seek out? And then building your marketing tactics around that, because you want to show up everywhere where your ideal customer profile is showing up. And when you have those crossing paths between webinars and emails and LinkedIn outreach and public relations and stuff, they start to see glimpses of you in different places. That's helping with that 66 touches that it takes to build that brand awareness and to build that credibility, trust, and interest in your products that you have.
Yeah, and not to go backwards, but we did talk in episode 57 about audience and positioning, right? And how it takes multiple decision makers now to make a decision, to make a purchase. I saw something the other day from a book. It's called The Jolt Effect. It was about overcoming prospect indecision. And in that book, they said 40 to 60% of deals today end up in no decision. Like, that's insane if you think about that, right? How do you overcome that? But because there's so many decision makers, and on a webcast that I saw the other day, they were talking about how many people average are making a decision on a major tech purchase. And they were saying from the data that they had it was from Foundry. That's the company that they own editorial brands, CIO, CSO, InfoWorld, Tech Advisor. They said that 25 people could be involved in a tech purchase decision for enterprise-wide thing. So if you're trying to convince 25 different people in one organization, that means you're going to have to talk in a different voice and with different content in different places to get to all of these people. So omnichannel just goes like exponential when you think of how many people are actually making a decision on the purchase.
Yes, those are really good statistics to think about and to put into perspective, like, how heavy of a lift marketing is. If you're going to build brand awareness out in the market and do it well, unfortunately, it takes an investment in time and resources and money to be able to build that engine out. And so if you've got 25 decision makers or influencers in a sales process because you're selling an enterprise level HR technology, you've got to think about it from every angle. And yes, it's not just about the channels that you do with your tactics, but it's about the variations with the tactics. So if you're doing webinars, which one of those 25 buyers, decision makers, influencers are you targeting with that? Be mindful, it's not a broad brush stroke of one size fits all. So you've got to really evaluate all of your marketing tactics that you're doing. And of course, that means looking at the other 11 levers that are part of this 12 levers we talk about, because it's knowing your audience and building your database and creating the right content and all the things. It's not an easy job to be a marketer these days.
So as far as getting the content out there, right, the tactical approach, right, like we look at it like as a three-legged stool, right, with three different legs as part of your demand generation engine. So it's your website, right? You have something you control, right? And then managed channels where you have control over it, but it's not totally your property. And then third-party channels, which are outside of your control if you're doing PR or something like that.
Yeah, and let's dig a little bit deeper into that. When we're building a demand generation engine at Growth Mode Marketing for our clients here in the HR tech space and beyond, we have 3 pillars that we focus on. The first is strategy, the second is content, the third we call distribution. And the distribution, that is where you're talking about the three-legged stool, Greg. It's our approach to building the tactical arm of demand generation. So when you're building out, we call it distribution, but it's really like, how do you get all that great content that you've created out in front of your ideal customer profile and all of the different buyer personas that are involved in that decision process? Whether you're selling to small companies and there's one person that makes that decision, or you're selling to enterprise and there's 25 people who are involved and have influence to some level in that decision process. But with website, so think of that as your digital storefront. That's about creating quality content that is rich. So when somebody comes to your site, it answers all of the buyer questions they have, and it gives them enough information to fulfill their initial needs. Because according to Gartner, and we've seen this out in the market, prospects are making up to 80% of their purchase decision before they're willing to engage with a sales rep. That means they're doing a lot of research up front. They're trying to figure everything out. They want to see product demos without talking to sales. They want to see basic pricing without talking to sales. They want to see case studies. They want to see all of these things about your product and educate themselves and do it. And so we look at the content phase of your website as how rich is it? Does it cover every stage of the buyer's journey, from I'm just looking for thought leadership type of content and educational content to I'm evaluating my options and how does this solve the pain points I have, to I've narrowed it down to a few options. Tell me why your solution is superior to the other options that I'm evaluating. And I think it's also about creating content loops. I always describe that as when you go on Google and you click on a link because you searched on something and you land on a page, you read the article. Do you want your prospects to hop back out to Google and go to the next article? Or do you want them to continue to look at content on your site? And these content loops, think of it as you may also like, where you're throwing up more content in front of them that they can click into to keep learning about a specific topic.
It's like you want them to get stuck in a rabbit hole, and you want it to be your website is the rabbit hole that they're stuck in.
Exactly, that it's so compelling and it's so relevant to them that they just keep clicking on the next link and reading that information. And the value with that, like the longer they spend on your site digging into content, the better credibility and trust it builds in that person's mind as they're looking at your content. The second leg of that stool, as Greg mentioned, is managed channels. And that's really about thinking along the lines of, from a marketing perspective, how do we build out an audience that wants to consume and engage with our content on a regular basis? So the tactics that can fall under it, you've got social media, podcasts, webinars, newsletters, emails, even digital campaigns. Like lots of tactics can fall under that, but you're creating the content with the intent not of, I'm going to sell this person today, but rather, I'm going to get this person interested in enough in what we have to say that they're going to continue to be interested in following our content. And the value with focused in on managed channels is that at the end of the day, if they continue to consume the content you're putting out there, not only is it building that brand awareness, that credibility and trust over time, because they've got this positive opinion of your company and your brand, you're going to be more likely to make the short list when they actually do enter in market and are ready to start seriously looking at options because they already know who you are. And ideally, they're looking at it and saying, you know what? I love the content that company XYZ puts out there. I am going to work with them someday. And if you can do this well, it really does work. We see it as an agency when we put content out there. We've had many conversations with people who are like, I don't have the budget today, but I really like the way you guys think. We will work with you someday. And you want to be that someday for all of the prospects that are not in market today, right? That they already have it in their mind. I'm going to work with you. I just have to figure out, and when the stars align, you're there and ready for them.
The last one is the third-party channels. So that's where you try to tap into your existing relevant audiences of your ICP and then drive them back to your managed channels and website. So you're trying to, reach out through PR, through other, articles on other websites that you don't have control over necessarily, but that you get your name in there and get your information in there, get your articles in there to try and get somebody to get your ICP, not somebody, get your ICP to know more about you and then want to learn more about you and go back to either your managed channel or your website.
And the key here when thinking about third-party channels is, where are your ideal customer profile type of companies hanging out today? Where are they going to consume information? There are resources out there who have already built that audience up. It's their own managed channel, right? And how do you tap into that? So it could be industry influencers, let's say analysts. It could be review sites like G2 and Captura and some of the others where they've got audiences coming and searching on this stuff. How do you tap into that? Industry events and trade shows, publications, all of those things where either you're getting them to talk about you, and hopefully in a positive light, to add a layer of credibility, or you're able to tap into their audience to get your own content out there. There's a lot of pay for play options out there. There's certainly some other that probably would fall in more of the category of PR, where you get invited on to be a guest on their podcast or to speak in their webinar, speak at the conference, things like that as well.
So as far as measurement, some of the issues that we've seen or indicators that you need to look at your measurement and see if you've set things up the right way, right? The big one is it's hard to believe, right? But people come and say, we're not sure how our programs are performing.
Yes. That actually happens more than it should, right? Like, bless their hearts, these marketers that are going and they're running 500 miles per hour and they're creating a lot of content and a lot of programs. But at the end of the day, if they're put on the line and the CEO says, I need you to show me the ROI of these programs, they're at a loss because they haven't actually been measuring things, and they maybe don't know or don't have a way to tie it back to revenue to indicate, yeah, you know what we are doing is clearly working, or what we're doing is not quite getting us there. And I think typically, like when a company's doing well, there's at a lot of organizations less of a focus on show me the numbers, show me how marketing is moving the needle for us, because the revenue is the ultimate number that matters, right? But the moment that sales stagnate or a company has trouble hitting its growth goals, or worst case scenario, the revenue is way behind where it was the previous year or quarter or month, that's when the pressure starts to come on to marketing to say, okay, we need more results. Marketing, what are you doing to solve this problem? And As marketers, we're like, well, we're doing this and this and this and this. And they're like, but we're not hitting our numbers. Okay, well, we need more budget then to be able to do this. The way CFOs and CEOs work, they're like, okay, show me how that will work. If I give you more money and it doesn't move the needle, that's a problem. I need you to show me that what you're doing is actually moving the needle and tell that story. Explain there is ROI in the marketing we're doing, or there isn't. And it's just so common, I think, in organizations where they haven't tracked these things, they don't know how to, but they need to justify ROI and they need to make better informed decisions on the marketing spend. Because if I'm the CEO and I give you, say, $1 million to run marketing programs and I'm expecting a 10x pipeline and that pipeline's not there, and the company is falling way short on the growth goals that were set in place at the beginning of the year, I'm going to be questioning it. And I'm going to be saying, like, okay, how can we make the right decisions around marketing and the investments we're making if we're running at this blind and we're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, right?
And a lot of times also when that's related to the data itself, like a lot of times people ask, they don't really trust the data. Sometimes you can even go back and show some ROI, but then there's questions about the data. Is this really true? Or I can't believe this is true. So sometimes there's just a lack of confidence in the data. So you have to go back and rehash how you come up with these numbers.
Well, and I think a great example of where there may be a lack of confidence in the data. Let's say marketing has a goal to hit marketing qualified lead volume level. Like, let's say you're supposed to produce 100 leads a month and marketing is doing that. They're exceeding that. Marketing's sitting there saying, we crushed our goals. Look at that. We're killing it. Let me report on this and tell you about all the MQLs that we created. Meanwhile, things aren't moving through the pipeline. And you said that statistic earlier, Greg, about 40 to 60% of deals come to no decision and fall off the radar. Then you have the other deals where they make a decision, but the decision is no, right? Like it might leave a slim margin that actually can and will move forward. So you might be creating a ton of MQLs, but at the end of the day, if the revenue is not there, you need to take a step back and look at that. And that's a red flag, because if MQLs don't translate to revenue, then MQLs are worthless, right? And that's where lack of confidence in the data comes, is as marketers, if we're given that kind of goal and we focus on, okay, how do we bring more leads in the door? How do we up those numbers? And it's not moving the needle. That's a red flag. That's a problem. And it's a very common problem, unfortunately.
Right, maybe you need to redefine what that quality part of the MQL is.
Right, for sure. Another problem that we see organizations have when it comes to the measurement is that the data sits in multiple places. So it's actually disjointed, and it makes it really hard for an organization and a marketing team to have a holistic view. So an example that I've lived firsthand when I was in the corporate world is I worked at an organization where they had a marketing automation system. They had Salesforce.com, and then they had a customer system, and none of the three were connected, right? And so even like getting basic data, you had to triangulate the three systems, but the three systems reported it differently. So it became nearly impossible to be able to pull together meaningful and accurate data because of that. And so if you're an organization where it's like, yeah, our data sits in multiple places, it's not easy for us to pull that information, that's probably an area where you need to look at, because at the end of the day, can you have really successful marketing programs without having the measurement? Yes, technically you can, but it comes back to how do you make those educated and informed decisions on where to cut spend and where to increase spend and which things to lean into and which things to back off of.
The other thing we've seen a few times is that people have the data, but they don't know exactly how to extrapolate anything out of it. So they don't understand what it means or how to use it. And so they actually have data, but they don't know what to do with it. Then they need help figuring that out. And sometimes that means setting up dashboards or whatever to make that more meaningful. But that's happened quite a few times too. But
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've seen organizations do, like the marketing team will put together a dashboard or a report, and it'll be like, all right, here's our open rates for email. And here's our click-through rates of those emails. And they get so ingrained in like reporting the numbers of things, but they forget to take a step back and explain to the audience they're giving this to the analysis of this data. It's not just putting numbers out there and looking at them, but understanding what are the trends? What is this data telling us? So for example, if you're running digital advertising campaigns and you pull all those metrics, at the end of the day, you've got to be able to explain, okay, are these numbers trending positively or negatively? And what does this data tell us? What insights can we glean from this? Can we determine like this campaign is performing really well? And we think if we invest more money into it, it's going to bring more opportunities in the door. Or on the flip side, this campaign, we're burning through money fast. We're not seeing a lot of leads, and the leads that we have don't seem to be going anywhere. We probably need to pull back on this marketing spend for our digital campaign and rethink, one, whether we continue to do digital marketing on a smaller scale or not at all, or two, whether we continue to do what we're doing, but we rework the actual campaigns because we feel like this is a good channel to be invested in, but our current approach with it is not working. And then I think the important thing to take away from looking at metrics and evaluating it is that the metrics don't always tell the whole story. Some companies and marketing teams get so wrapped up in, we've got to report on the metrics, that they only focus on tactics that can be easily measured. So things like digital advertising and email campaigns and webinar attendees and social media likes and stuff like that. But taking those and using that as like, here's the story, is an incomplete story, because the reality is, from a marketing standpoint, you're doing an omnichannel approach. It's the layers of all the marketing you're doing that collectively work together to drive results for the organization. And unfortunately, not every activity is easily measurable. For example, if you're doing a lot of work to get content placed in industry publications, how do you measure that? People may read it. Let's say it's a printed publication. You don't know how many people actually read it. They don't necessarily tell you when they come in the door, hey, I'm calling you because I just read your article on HR.com. They're elusive to you. Same with like podcasts and just different content that you might have out there that people are seeing and people are consuming, but you don't have a direct way to measure it like you would if they literally clicked on a link in your email campaign. That doesn't mean you should discount those things by any means. But when you think about metrics, you have to figure out like, what are the right metrics to measure? And how does this support driving more revenue and making those connections and ties, and then being able to tell the holistic story to say, we're doing a podcast is one of the tactics. While we can't directly measure the results that podcast is bringing in, here's the reasons why we believe that this is an important part of our omnichannel approach and why we need to continue to invest in it, right? And you've got to be able, from a metric standpoint, to make educated and informed decisions, but also to be able to tell the holistic story for your executive team to understand, this is the approach, this is why we're doing it, this is why we're continuing to do these pieces, even though we can't directly measure, and getting creative with that.
It's hard when you can't put a number against building credibility and trust. Like how, unless you're going to spend tons of money on brand awareness and brand affinity types of studies, you're not going to know how that really affects everything. And then until you strip it away, then you might notice a difference.
So true. I just saw someone's post on LinkedIn that they were talking about we spent a ton of money on digital advertising programs and we didn't feel like they were driving results. So we decided to pull them out. And they're like, and the good news is our revenue is up this quarter. And someone else responded and they're like, I'd love for you to report back on this in 3 to 6 months, when the reality of stripping out those branding things is more clear, because they're like the timing on these things. It's not I pulled my digital advertising yesterday and today we met our goals. Therefore, the digital advertising had no factor in it. Because how long are sales cycles? For a lot of organizations, it can be months to close those deals, especially reports being that sales for HR tech and technology in general have really slowed down in the last year. Like the sales process, meaning something that used to take 6 months to sell on average now is taking 9 months because buyers are not moving as fast as they did in the past, right? So you've got to keep that in perspective. What you do today does not necessarily correlate to the results you see today. Marketing is a long-term game, and to drive results, what you did 6 months ago might be the results you see today. And what you do today might be the results you see in 6 months. So you've got to have that holistic view of it. And if you're finding like, okay, metrics is an area of our organization that we need to work on because you have any of the issues that we just talked about, then you need to take a step back and make sure you've defined the metrics that you're measuring and are able to tell that story of how things are performing and why you're making those investments. Maybe you need to create a metrics dashboard that pulls all the data into one view. Maybe you need new analytics tools. But I think one of the important things to think about is how do you create a regular reporting mechanism for your team, for your executives, for anyone else in the organization that needs to be tuned into what you're doing in marketing and how that is impacting the success of the organization.
Yes, I think as we wrap up this episode, just remember that dialing in these two marketing levers, tactics and measurement, is key for driving your marketing strategy forward. We've talked a lot about practical steps and some insights to ensure that these two components are tuned up and propelling your demand generation efforts. So remember, it's not just setting the wheels in motion, but also steering them in the right direction. So stay committed to your tactics and measure the outcomes, adjust how you measure things if you need to. And then obviously, like everything else with marketing, continuously refine and review and then head back out with a new iteration or slightly adjusted iteration of what you did.
Yes. So join us again next time as we unpack the final two crucial levers, which are marketing and sales alignment and sales processes. And be sure to reach out to our team at GrowthMode Marketing if you need help dialing in the marketing levels for your organization.
Thanks for joining us on the Demand Gen Fix, a podcast for HR tech workers, brought to you by GrowthMode Marketing. We sure hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe for more perspectives on demand generation and B2B marketing strategies. Plus, give us a like. Tell your friends. We'll see you next time.